whenever I have you like do like these for me, like chunks for me that you turn in for a grade, or like your essays, we do them in blue or black pen because like that's what we have to do on the exam. Plus, when I have old eyes and it's hard for me to read pencils sometimes, and so pen is much easier for me to read, and it doesn't strain my eyes as much. Hashtag getting old. Okay, what I'm going to show you today is skill 3. So skill 3 is finding evidence and claims. But really for us, it's like organization and planning. That's what's happening in this skill. Bless you. All right. So remember how when we were working through our annotations, I said we annotate to plan, right? So now here comes the planning part of this. So I don't know, how have y'all been taught like to organize planning in the past? Like what have you been taught how to like brainstorm or plan an essay? Okay, so you know the structure, but then like do you just start writing that structure? Like you don't plan before?
You just write down the topic and what you're doing each one.
Okay. Okay. Nick, what else?
Maybe like brainstorming graphs that you make for yourself.
Yeah, like I used to be like a spiderweb person. Like my brainstorming is like usually all over the place. So the structure that I'm going to show you is not optional. Okay, like this is required for me. This is something that we will use this structure all year long. You will use this structure when you go into your history classes. You will use this structure when you go to your science classes, because this is going to become familiar to you. When you go to senior year, you're going to use the same structure. When you go off to college, you're going to email me from college and go, oh my God, I'm sitting in my first English class in college and I just got an A. Like, because this structure is so easy, okay? So, we plan, have y'all heard of a T-chart before? Old school T-chart, okay? So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a T-chart. And we're going to draw it a little bit bigger than we need to because we're going to write. And kind of, we're taking notes and planning all at the same time. So, remember when we were reading, after we deconstructed the prompt and found the rhetorical situation things, and then we numbered our body paragraphs. What was the next thing we did before we started reading? We numbered our body paragraphs and then what? Guessed a shift, okay? So the reason why I have you find a shift is because that's how we're going to organize. So this right here indicates a shift. That line in the middle indicates your shift in your reading, in your passage. So I'm going to jot down like our steps of how we plan. So the very first thing we do is I'm not going to count like drawing your T-chart. The very first thing we do is we find our shift. So go with your partner, look at Bush. Where did we identify a shift? Talk with your partner. Go. Chair keeps sliding down. Can y'all see from how you look? Okay. Ooh, really bad. Okay. Where did we identify a shift in here between what paragraphs?
3 and 4.
Okay. Between 3 and 4 and then 6 and 7. So if we're going to do a major one, let's identify between 3 and 4 first. Okay. So what happens is this is going to be body paragraph number 1 of our essay, and this is body paragraph number 2 of our essay. So when we say what happens before the shift goes in body paragraph 1, right? So now what I'm going to label is this is going to be paragraphs 1 through 3, right? So paragraphs 1 through 3 of the passage goes in our first body paragraph. You with me so far? Okay. So that means in our second body paragraph, we have paragraphs. Y'all know that's the paragraph symbol, right? Holy cow. Friends, that's a paragraph symbol. That's called a revising and editing symbol. It's 2 lines with a little C on the top. Learn something new every day. All right. So then so body paragraph 2 will be we'll cover paragraphs 4 through 9. With me? Yep.
Sorry, I don't have a new prescription and I really can't read that color.
Okay. That's fine. I love it. Thanks for telling me. I'll change it. So this is paragraphs 4 through paragraph 9. That's fine. I was just looking at it going, that's pretty light. So step 1, we found a shift. Easy? Good. Okay. Now, stay with me. I'm using all my colors. Now, we're going to do another half. So our second step is find the half of the half. Step 2 is find the half of a half. So now we've divided the essay, the passage, in half. Now we need to divide it in half because I'm going to tell you my language. This is what we call a chunk. So for me, this is chunk number 1. You'll hear me talk this language all year long. Chunk number 1, chunk number 2. So, as you can see in our body paragraphs, how many chunks do we have per body paragraph? 2. Okay? A chunk for me means evidence plus justification. So when you hear me talk a chunk, I'm talking a piece of evidence and then analysis. So now that we have found the shift, and now we need to find our half of our half. So we have to look at what paragraphs is chunk 1 going to cover and what paragraphs is chunk 2 going to cover. Well, the first half is easy, right? Are we going to do anything about paragraph 1? No. So we're just going to divide this first half in half, right? So we have paragraphs 1 through, we're just going to say 1 and 2. And then chunk 2 is going to come from paragraph 3. With me? Remember, we annotated the plan. So what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to drop our annotations into this. This is kind of mindless right now. This doesn't can take much thought. Now, let's do it for the second half. Now, what you can look for is how are we going to group paragraphs 4 through 9? Talk to your partner. How do we divide 4 through 9 in half? Talk with your partner. What do you see? All right. This is kind of easy because what did we find as we were still reading? Another shift, right? So instead of making it a whole nother body paragraph and so anytime we do a body paragraph, it suggests that there's a shift in the passage somewhere, right? So instead of having to write a third body paragraph, We'll get to how we do that later. But for now, that shift will identify how we're going to divide our second half in half. So, where was our second shift? Between 6 and 7. So, chunk number 1 from the second half is going to come paragraphs 4 through 6. And then chunk number 2 is going to come paragraphs 7 through paragraph 9, knowing that we're not really probably doing anything in 9 and we're not doing anything with 1. So far, those 2 steps are pretty mindless, right? We're looking at our annotations and we're dividing. Turn to your partner. Do you have any questions about this process? This is the process we will use all first quarter, going into second quarter for rhetorical analysis. Turn to your partner. Do you have any questions? Go. Okay. Any questions in planning so far? Yep.
Since you marked like the shift between like the body paragraph 1 and body paragraph 2, do you want us to mark the shift between like the paragraphs too? Like for like with the shift between 6 and 7?
Well, I mean, as we were reading, like you saw that, like you kind of noticed that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, like I wouldn't say this does not have to be a shift. Like that line does not have to be a shift. The way that you can figure this out is sometimes you'll feel like in that half things just naturally kind of chunk with each other or like group with each other. Sometimes you can't decide where that is, so I just divide the paragraphs in half, right? So let's say our first one, let's say we have a longer passage like Obama, and you have, 19 paragraphs, I think, in there. So let's say the first half is paragraphs 1 through 10, and then you don't know how to divide up those first 10 paragraphs. If there's not a clear shift in like tone, perspective, purpose, structure, then you can just say 1 through 5, 6 through 10, right? So if you don't see a shift, this is a shift. We saw this here because it's a shift in time, right? That helped us to easily divide those two. But it's not always going to be that way. That's a great question. Good so far? All right. Now what I have to do is I have to go find a piece of evidence. Now let's talk about evidence. When I talk about evidence, you're going to hear me talk about evidence being 3D. What does it mean that something is 3D? Like if you see something in 3D, what does that mean? Yeah, like you can see all the positions. You can see it, right? So that's what we talk about with evidence. We need to choose evidence that gives us the ability to make it 3D. If we just choose a word, that's not 3D because all you can tell me is what that word means. We look at things 3D because we look at how we annotated it. Were we able to label multiple things, label it multiple things? Oh, there's a list. Oh, there's a conjunction. Oh, there's a metaphor in the same piece of evidence. And were you able to connect it to multiple components of the rhetorical situation? If you can do those two things, that's a piece of evidence that's 3D. What happens is, think about that Alfred Green essay that you wrote me. How many of you were confident that you can choose a piece of evidence? You're like, I know that this piece of evidence is valuable. Raise your hand if you thought you could choose a piece of evidence that's valuable. Y'all, seriously? Okay. Half of y'all don't want to raise your hand. How many of y'all were fairly confident in your first sentence that you wrote about what that piece of evidence meant, but your second sentence you were pretty confident that it was just the same thing in more words? You felt it was summary, yes? Okay. So that, my friends, is what I call the circle of stupidity, right? You just sit there and you're in a roundabout and you can't get out. because you're just saying the same thing over and over again, and in your head going, I know I'm saying the same thing over and over again. I don't know what to do. It's no fault of your own because you've never been shown how to get out of that. When we look at something that is 3D, when we are connecting it to multiple rhetorical situations, those are all your exits out of the circle of stupidity. Because you won't have to say the same thing over and over again, because you could connect it to leverage. You could connect it to the speaker. You can connect it to this audience. Those are your ways out of that circle. Yes? So we want to go in now and look at our annotations because we annotate to plan and go, okay, body paragraph number 1, well, not 1 because we don't like 1. Good evening. There's nothing there. Let's look at body paragraph number 2. What's a piece of evidence that I told you that these are the types of piece of evidence that we want to look for sure. What's a piece of evidence in there that I told you to look for that we can connect to multiple pieces of the rhetorical situation that we like? Talk to your partner. You got like 30 seconds. Go. All right, body paragraph 1. So step number 3 is we're going to identify our evidence. We are doing this based off of our annotations. So what is something in paragraph 2 that we would consider 3D? Okay. Our citizens, our way of life, our very freedom. Okay, remember, what is our purpose? What are we trying to find? What is our purpose? Okay, so when we're looking at this, we're looking at trying to reaffirm the country's strength. So, in his very first sentence, is he doing that? Is there something in there? Yeah. But are we going to be able to do enough with it? Not much. What else is in that first paragraph that we labeled? Maddie?
The last few sentences, but they have failed, our country is strong, that conjunction.
Okay. We have the conjunction in the short sentences. Do y'all know what to do with short sentences yet? What's something else in there? I'm not going to let y'all choose a bad piece. You're on?
The 2 dashes to show.
Yeah, we just showed that was an emotion. We didn't connect it to much. What else? Grace?
It goes from talking about a lot of terrible sadness and stuff until these acts of mass murders were instead deportations. They actually treated it, but they have failed.
Okay, we didn't really list any, or we didn't identify anything in there.
Like the list of people could be like connected back to like the law.
Okay, there we go. So I'm going to choose a piece of evidence, and I'm going to write this piece of evidence in here. And I'm going to write enough of it so that I know like all the things that I'm looking at. Airplanes or in their offices, right? So we have conjunctions, we have a semicolon, and we have a list. Okay. That's where we're starting, right? So that's enough for me to know that that's what I'm going to use. And then we go in, after we identify our evidence, we label our evidence. So your label, what are we labeling that? We labeled the conjunction, we labeled the colon, and we labeled the list. Does that make it 3D? Yep. And I'm just writing enough down so that I see all those things, right? The victims were in airplanes or in their offices. The colon, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers. I'm going to use that whole list, but I don't have to write the whole list down for my piece of evidence for planning. So look at paragraph 3. What do we like about paragraph 3? What's something in there that we found? Now, what I want to tell you is this real quick. Let me back up. The evidence that you told me is not wrong. I'm just trying to not let y'all choose crappy evidence early, right? That we can't say anything about. So look at paragraph 3. What is in paragraph 3 that is a good piece of evidence that we would consider 3D? Talk with your partner. You got 10 seconds. Go. Shame on y'all for talking to each other and then not talking to me. Okay, now that y'all talk to each other, what's a piece of evidence that we like? Okay, the metaphor. Which one? Start with the first one? Let's start with the foundation first, because when we look at it, we can see multiple, right? So we want to choose the strongest. So we're going to choose the shake, the foundations of our biggest buildings. But they cannot touch the foundation of America. Okay, so now we're going to label. We have the metaphor comparison, right? We also have a conjunction in there. With me? So let's just look at the first half. So then what we have to go do now is we have to look at claims. This top right here, this is going to be our claim. You used to call it a topic sentence. We don't have topic sentences anymore because topic sentences are topical. We talk about claims. Claims is the language of argument, right? So claims, remember that you can have no facts. These were in your AMSCO notes. No facts, meaning I can't go and point to a line in the text and go, there's my claim. I have to look at 3 or 4 things to combine to say that's my claim. So our claim also answers the question of how or why to our purpose. So if our purpose is reaffirming the country's strength, now we're going to plan from the bottom up. What is happening before the shift? What did we say is happening before the shift? Look at your... What did we label before the shift? Why did we mark it there? What do our notes say? Okay, so it's what happened. So we're looking at a time, right? So did we tie, like, how does that prove our strength? It doesn't, right? Like, he's just showing us what happened. That doesn't reaffirm the country's strength. So what else did we attach to that? We looked up 2 words. Okay, so we want to look up, like, empathetically. Looked at the day's events. So does that still prove our strength by just looking at the day's events? What do those two things prove or show about us as Americans? That we what? Okay, so we have a strong willpower. What can we combine strong willpower into, like, one word? If you have a strong willpower to overcome that, what do we say that is?
Determination.
Determination, resolve. So we can say, in order to show resolve, like America's resolve. So our claim would be, in the first half, George Bush empathetically addresses the day's events in order to show America's resolve. Does that answer the question of how or why should we be strong? We should be strong because we are resolved to overcome. Check. Math works. That, my friends, is your first lesson in how we organize. So tomorrow we will finish. We'll look at the second half and see if we can do the second half together. Actually, you're going to do it with a partner.